Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chrislyn Particka, and I'm the host and moderator for today's Clean Plants for the Future of the Eastern Wine and Grape Industry webinar. Our webinar today is New York's Revitalized Grapevine Certification Program and New York Nurseries Plans for the Future. First, we'll hear from Marc Fuchs at Cornell University and Margaret Kelly with the New York Department of Ag and Markets, who will talk about the program itself. Marc is an associate professor in the Department of Plant Pathology and Plant Microbiology at Cornell University in Geneva, New York. He has worked on viruses of fruit crops and vegetables over the past 30 years, developing detection techniques, understanding spread, and investigating management strategies. Margaret is Assistant Director of the Division of Plant Industry at the New York State Department of Ag and Markets. She is a graduate of Cornell University, and she's pleased to apply her horticulture and plant disease knowledge to the proactive disease prevention of the Grape Certification Program. Later on, we're going to hear from nursery owners Eric Amberg, Dennis Rack, and Fred Merwarth, who will talk about how they as nursery owners are responding to this new program. Tim will introduce them prior to their talks. Remember that as a participant in the webinar today, we ask that you keep microphones muted if you have them. If you are having any technical difficulties or have a question for one of the speakers or even just a general comment, please type a note in the chat pod over on the lower right-hand side of the screen. We'll take a break after Marc's presentation and again after Margaret's to address questions for them, and then we'll also have a Q&A session with the 3 nursery owners as a group. So Marc, with that, I'm going to let you get started.
Thank you very much, Chrislyn. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, to start, I'd like to express my gratitude to Tim Martin for putting together this wonderful and fantastic webinar series and for organizing today's session, and also to the National Clean Plant Network for sponsoring the event. Thanks to Chrislyn for moderating today's session and to all of you who decided to spend some of your time to participate. What I'd like to do today is to provide an overview of what certification is, what it is supposed to achieve, and why it is important. And to get started, I'd just like to remind all of us why certification is needed and why it should be embraced by the grape and wine industry. And in a previous session, we talked about viruses and their impact in the Northeast, particularly in New York, Michigan, and Virginia. And we illustrated a few examples where viruses had been shown to have severe effects on vigor, yield, fruit quality, and the productive lifespan of vineyards. And among these examples, we talked about leaf roll, which can reduce yield by up to 30%. And here it's more around 30%, as shown on this slide, of Cabernet Franc, where this comparative picture is indicating, a depression in yield on the leaf-infected vine to your right-hand side compared to a healthy control to the left. And more importantly, even food qualities, as illustrated here on Pinot Noir, where if you use fruits from a Pinot Noir infected vine, you may produce a beverage that some might consider wine, others might have another opinion. Red blotch is another one that was presented as having tremendous impact on yield and quality of the fruits, as illustrated here on Pinot Noir. A third example that was extensively presented during one of the previous sessions was tomato ring spot, very often on unrooted hybrids, as Vidal here, where the impact can be so severe that a vineyard manager is not capable of making any crop any longer, or even, as illustrated for Vidal or Chardonnay, if I recall well, by Annemiek in Michigan, for tobacco ring spot virus, vines can even die following virus infection. So viruses can have severe effects on vigor, yield, fruit quality, productive lifespan of vineyards. What we have to keep in mind is once a vine is infected with a virus, it will keep the virus for its lifespan. In other words, there is no cure in an infected vineyard. And therefore, prophylactic measures, basically avoiding the introduction of a virus in any given vineyard or any given region, is so key. And this can be achieved by establishing vineyards with planting material that is derived from clean, virus-tested stocks. And I will go a little bit, in a few minutes, I will tell you what I really mean here. In other words, one of the major objectives, one of the primary objectives of certification is to reduce the presence and limit the presence of viruses in the propagation material. So how does certification work? And I try to put a little flow chart together to walk you through the different steps as to what certification is all about based on the current models, which are very, very similar wherever grapes are grown. So we all start up front with the production of clean plants. And these clean vines are produced by clean plant centers who are part of the National Clean Plant Network or by private enterprises. And the material is clean and can be derived from either domestic accessions or different accessions that are safely introduced into the U.S. from abroad. So the centers that are involved in the production of clean plants and are part of the National Clean Plant Network, there are 5 of them: Foundation Plant Services at Davis in California, the Clean Plant Center in the Northwest at Washington State University in Prosser, Washington, the Midwest Tissue Culture and Virus Testing Program at Missouri State University in Mountain Groves in Missouri, the Southeast Wine Improvement Program at Florida A&M in Tallahassee, Florida, and the Eastern Clean Plant Program at Cornell University in Geneva, New York. These centers, obviously, to produce clean vines, use the most robust diagnostic methodologies to make sure that whatever testing is done on these vines is negative. And they also use the most robust therapeutics methodologies to make sure that if an accession of interest or an elite accession of interest to the industry were to be found infected by the virus, the methodology would be available to clean up the material and make virus-tested, negative, obviously, tested material available to the industry. So once the plants are determined to be clean, they are established in what is referred to as a foundation block. Or sometimes you may hear about the nomenclature G followed by a number, and the foundation block would be referred to as a G1 block. So this is a vineyard that hosts the elite material and that is of the highest possible that shows the highest possible cleanliness in terms of disease, and particularly viruses. From there, usually I have to mention that a limited number of clean vines of any given accession or selection or rootstock is established in these foundation blocks. And just for your understanding, if a given clone is maintained clean, these foundation blocks, usually there are 3 or 4 vines available. And obviously, this limited number, although it has the highest cleanliness standard, is not sufficient to supply the demand for the whole country. Therefore, from the limited number of vines that are clean, that are available in foundation blocks, cuttings are used and further propagated and established in what is referred to as increased blocks, just to bulk up the number of clean buds available for propagation and grafting. And from these increased blocks, and sometimes from foundation blocks, the nurseries are producing the material that has been ordered and is used by the industry for establishment in vineyards. So that's basically the gist of this flow chart on how grapes are propagated and made available from the clean plant centers to end users for establishment in vineyards. And current certification models put a lot of effort and emphasis on the foundation blocks, the G1 blocks, where there is tremendous auditing and quality control that is occurring just to make sure that the highest possible standards are implemented on the material established in foundation blocks. And following, in parallel, there is extensive monitoring, or sometimes, lighter levels of monitoring that is occurring in increased blocks and in nursery blocks, just to make sure that the material that is derived from the cleanest possible material maintained in G1 blocks remains clean and is not compromised either through human errors or through the introduction of viruses by vectors. Sometimes the clean material available in clean blocks is not sufficient in quantity sufficient enough, again, to supply the demand. And from G2 blocks, there is further increase and bulking up of the number of clean vines available through G3 or G4 or G5, and sometimes even G6 increased blocks. And obviously, the further away you go from the foundation block, the G1 block, the higher the likelihood of viruses present in the material will be. So let's go back to the nursery material, because this is where the material that is established in vineyards is sourced from. Where does this material come from? Very often, the material used at nursery vineyards are directly coming from increased blocks, G2, G3, G4, G5, sometimes from G1, but also from existing commercial vineyards. And again, the further you're moved from the foundation block, the more likely you will find diseases that no one wants to deal with, whether at the nursery level or at the commercial level. But this is a reality because of the limited number of clean buds that are available to supply the demand. Let's go back for just a little bit to the initial steps of the flow chart. Again, the foundation block. Currently, there are foundation blocks maintained by Foundation Plant Services at UC Davis, the Clean Plant Center in the Northwest at Prosser, Washington State, and the Midwest Tissue Culture Virus Testing Program in Mountain Groves, Missouri, as well as by Florida A&M in Tallahassee, Florida. New York does not maintain a foundation block. So therefore, based on the strong desire to reinstate a certification and program in New York, we sat down with the local nurseries and representatives of the Department of Agriculture in New York to try to imagine what a New York certification program would look like, with the premise that it should be realistic and meaningful. And basically, instead of putting most of our efforts in the foundation block that we do not manage, we decided to put our emphasis on an increased blocks managed by the nurseries. And the reason being that we felt that we would have more impact in terms of the likelihood to provide clean material to the end users if we were to put our efforts closer in a step as close as possible to what the end users will be dealing with. So basically, what we have envisioned is again, put all the efforts in terms of auditing and quality control on the increased blocks. And this is where we put tremendous time and efforts trying to figure out, first of all, what qualifies as an increased block. Would any site qualify as an increased block? And obviously no, and I will not cover the technical details as to the outcomes of our numerous conversations. Margaret Kelly will cover this information in her talk in a few minutes. But obviously not every site would qualify, and not every vine would qualify for the increased block. Again, there are limitations as to what type of vines would qualify for an increased block. And then we talked extensively on the level of audit and the frequency of audit of these vines to make sure that, again, what was initially clean and established clean remains clean over time. And we discussed extensively the steps needed to monitor not only the increased blocks, but the nursery blocks, again, to make sure that we do all what is possible to limit the presence of undesired viruses in the planting material that will be used to establish commercial vineyards. So I hope I convinced you that certification is important. We are thinking a little bit outside of the box in our way to reinstate a certification program in New York. And we all know, all acknowledge that the planting material is the most valuable and critical input for grape production, juice, and wine making. So it is worthwhile to spend a lot of efforts making sure that the planting material has the highest quality possible in terms of viticulture characteristics, but also in terms of cleanliness. And one of the objectives of the New York certification is to provide an opportunity to make available regionally produced planting material derived from virus-tested stocks. And again, as a reminder, this reinstation of the program derived directly from grassroots efforts. It is numerous conversations over time with the local nurseries and pushed by the local industries that realize the negative impact and all the losses incurred due to viruses that pushed up to consider reinstating this program. And one of the other motivation of the program was to be as close as possible to the end users so that whatever efforts and investments were made were likely to impact directly the end users. So one of the questions we always have, and we still don't have the answer, is how much is this going to cost, and why would I consider selecting New York certified material if I want to establish a new vineyard? Well, we all know the impact of the viruses as illustrated in a previous session. And what we try to do is to compare the net revenues if a vineyard manager were selecting virus-tested planting material. Assuming that no viruses, if this material were to be used, no viruses would be introduced in the vineyards, versus planting material that would be derived from currently existing increased blocks or commercial vineyards. And obviously, you might remember from the previous session that surveys done in New York 10 years ago, or more recently in Virginia and Michigan, have indicated a high prevalence of viruses, for example, lethal viruses in a lot of these vineyards. For example, in New York, over 60% of the vineyard blocks that were more or less randomly selected for a lethal survey indicated the presence of these viruses of leaf-associated viruses, more than 60% of the vineyard blocks. So the likelihood if budwood were to be randomly collected in these vineyards, especially in wintertime where there is no way to visually assess the presence of these viruses, that a number of these buds used for propagation or grafting would carry leaf-roll viruses. And just assuming that 5% of the vines from any given vineyard block would be used and actually have a leaf roll, we then calculated, if you want, a break-even premium to see what could be an estimate of the cost of the program or the cost even to a vineyard manager. And assuming again that about 5% of the cuttings collected from commercial vineyards would carry the virus, cuttings handled by nurseries, a break-even price premium would be of 48%. This directly means that if we use the current average price of $3.50 per vine, the break-even premium would be $168 for a total price of $518. Again, this is just a little exercise to put a dollar figure as to what would be economically reasonable for a vineyard manager to anticipate if virus-tested material were to be made available to him. Again, this is very theoretical, as I just want to emphasize that no price tag has been, as I know of today, been decided on what the cost will be down the road. And obviously, this has to be taken like insurance subscription against risks. Because again, keep in mind that if you take a risk of using non-certified material in New York, the growers will deal with the economic losses, not only on the direct impact on yield, which will be reduced, and on fruit quality, but also all the management that is needed to maintain the profitability of these vineyards to an acceptable level. And obviously, when you think about the premium, the lower the 60% probability that the vineyard block has leaf roll, the lower the premium will be. So this being said, I just think that in summary, selecting planting material, we know it's one of the most critical decisions for a vineyard manager and owner, because this is an investment that will provide dividends, for the next half century or so. And selecting planting material derived from virus-tested stock will definitely increase vineyard profitability. But just to close, I'm convinced that I'm very excited about the fact that we are in the position to reinstate a Grape certification program in New York. But I'm very convinced that the only way that program can be successful, it's only if end users actively participate and will embrace the New York certified material. And with this, I'd like to conclude and thank all of you, thank the National Clean Plant Network and other sponsors who support my research and extension program. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we had a couple, Marc. Thanks for your presentation. The first question was from Tim, who said, Marc, with grafted vines, you not only have to have a clean scion, but also a clean rootstock to graft to. What happens if you have a virus-tested scion, but rootstock sourced from certified blocks from another state?
So that's an excellent question, Tim. Basically, the scenario that you're describing, a virus-infected scion on a clean rootstock will not qualify for certification. Because as you mentioned, both the scion and the rootstock have to be clean and proven to be clean.
Okay. Then we had another question from Cindy, who asked, will the New York certification program allow propagation from G4 nursery stock to be considered certified, so G5? Will there be a requirement for downstream testing beyond the G2 level?
So that's another excellent question, and there is no provision as we speak today for G4, G5, or even G2 or G3 material to be considered by the certification program in New York.
Okay, that's all the questions that we've had so far. So, ooh, wait, don't do that. All right, didn't mean for that to happen. So with that, Margaret, thanks Marc for your presentation and for answering the questions. So Margaret, I'm going to let you get started with your presentation now.
Okay, thank you very much. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, just fine.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us. This is exciting. I'm going to talk to you about what Grape certification in New York will look like from the view of the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, and we are your friendly regulatory agency that will make sure that you're getting what you intend to be getting. And yes, I do know that my inspector there is not looking at a grapevine, so I do know that. Oh, I could even move the slides. This is all good. Okay, so so why are we doing Grape certification? First of all, why bother? Who cares? Well, Marc covered a lot of that, but these are, we know that viruses cause significant loss to grapes. They reduce the sugar, you get uneven ripening, you reduce yield, lower price. I mean, let's face it, it's really all about money. That's why we're interested in it. It makes a difference on the bottom line. And for us, what does Grape certification mean in New York? Well, it's really a virus testing program to test and see what viruses are there. And we're resurrecting an existing regulation that we have on the books that has unfortunately languished for quite some time. And as Marc had mentioned, we've been working with the nurseries to figure out how we can bring this back, because there is such a demand for clean material from not just New York vineyards, but throughout the country. And we've been very fortunate to work together with Marc Fuchs, Tim Martinson, and Tom Burr and others from Cornell to help us be smarter and come across like we know what we're talking about. The viruses that we want to look at are the ones that cause people to lose money. These are the viruses that matter. They cause economic damage. You can find lots of viruses, but if they're not causing any damage to a crop and there's no problem with them, who cares? Whoopee, there's a virus there, but it doesn't do anything. So the viruses that we're focusing on are the ones that matter, that are known to occur and cause problems, the ones that we've seen economic losses from. With the grapevine leaf roll viruses, there's actually 5 different viruses that we are concerned with that we look at. And then on these others that I've listed, you'll see a little N next to 3 of them, the tomato ring spot virus, tobacco ring spot virus, and the grapevine fan leaf virus. Those are all vectored by nematodes, so we have to get interested in the soil and what's going on with nematodes, so we're ahead of that. So what does this mean to certify grapes? What are the logistics? What comes in? Well, in New York State, our intention is to test 1 in 4 vines of the mother block every year. And so over 4 years, we will have tested all the vines in that mother block. So we're going to be doing a more assertive testing in those nursery-based mother blocks than any other program in the country. But this is because we all want to be sure of what's going on, and that's a very important piece. And if we can manage that piece well and be confident in that piece, then those who are buying the vines can also be confident in the vines that they're buying, that they're as clean as they can be. The testing will be done by the New York State Ag Experiment Station, Cornell, located Geneva. Inspections will be being done by New York State horticultural inspectors. So this brings in a third party. You've got someone else taking a look at things and keeping an eye on things. So I refer to trust but verify. We know what the nurseries are doing, they've agreed, and what they're agreeing to, but let's just be sure for everyone's sake, for their sake as well, that things are really going according to plan. The sampling for this testing will also be done by the New York State horticultural inspectors, and that takes care of the chain of custody, so we know that the sample we took and is affiliated with the vine. And we've got a fair amount of experience with this, unfortunately, from our plumpox virus survey, where we are able to maintain our samples with a one-to-one association. So the same thing will happen with the vines. We'll take a sample and we'll be able to know exactly which vine that sample came from. So then if there is a problem found with a virus, then that within a vine, that vine could be roved out, and along with the neighboring vines, and some repeat additional testing can be done so that we're confident in the cleanliness of the material in that mother block. And we're not just talking about the sign material, we're also looking at the rootstock material and trying to make sure that this is clean. So we will be testing that as well. What the nursery has to do is first they're going to apply to us, and I'm sure they'll be happy to tell you that they've been ready to do that for about 30 years, but they will be applying to the Department of Agriculture and saying which what that they would like to be in this program and what blocks they would like and areas and fields they want to have in this program. Isolation is one of the first steps in site selection and is important so that we keep these vines away from any vectors. So the mother blocks will be isolated from any other grapevines by 100 feet. So the vectors that are able to ride the wind, such as our mealybug friends, and come in, won't be making it because it's simply going to be too far. So isolation from any grapevines is very important. And then with the nursery blocks themselves, we'll have an isolation of 30 feet. Also very important is that initially, as they initially select their mother blocks, they will not have had grapevines on that land for the previous 4 years, so that there aren't any remnants of grape tissue in the soil that could be harboring viruses. Soil samples will be taken of the sites, and the level of nematodes in those soil samples will be assessed, and particularly because we're looking for the dagger nematodes, and we're going to require that those nematodes in levels be below this designated level, so that the risk of infection from those nematodes is not going to be a factor. If we don't have the nematodes there, they're not going to be doing any vectoring. Where are they getting these initial vines from? Well, Marc mentioned the foundation plant sources through the National Clean Plant Network. And in New York, in our program, based on our knowledge of what's going on in the National Clean Plant Network and the material that is available, we will recognize grapevines from Foundation Plant Services at UC Davis in California, and then Foundation grape material from the Center for the Clean Plant Center of the Northwest, based in Prosser, Washington, under the direction of Washington State University. We also will allow cleaned up material that's been cleaned up through tissue culture, so we can also do that process and bring it up to the same level as a foundation would, but that's where we would want that material sourced from. The cleanest of the clean, so that we're able to start out appropriately. And as mentioned before, both the rootstock and scion must be from such clean sources. Couple of closing thoughts. There will be a labeling or tagging for these vines, so there will be a tag for New York certified grapevines that will be provided by the New York State Department of Agriculture. We've been talking with the nurseries how to do this in a practical way, so we're not adding to the things that need to be done with the nursery, and we're going to work this in as smoothly as possible with their existing tagging programs. Essentially what you want to do is, with a certification is we want to start clean, and in the Natural Clean Plant Network we talk about starting clean and staying clean. But we really need to, that process of staying clean is through monitoring, and then also the state, in our case, will be verifying. The state provides the verification. We're sort of your insurance. Okay, we know it was clean when we started, but let's go in and make sure that there's ongoing surveys. So not only are we surveying and testing the mother blocks, we will also be surveying the nursery blocks where the vines are being further multiplied. So we will also be scouting those and monitoring them and taking samples of any suspect material as well as some random sampling just to be sure that everything's the way everybody wants it to be. And essentially our role is to protect the investment that everyone is making, the nursery is making, and the vineyard manager as they make their purchases for their vineyards. I do want to mention that we do already have some very clean material in New York, even though we have not had a certification program where you get that, some nice seal of approval from the Department of Agriculture. And so just because we haven't had a certification program doesn't mean that our material is not clean. We have quite a bit of very clean material, and the nurseries are all very committed to knowing what they have and monitoring their crops. I think that we're going to have a very meaningful certification program because we've seen what can happen when people get a little lax, and we're going to be making sure that New York certification truly means something. I tend to say, there's a song, that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, because, this is New York after all. So I want to thank you. I definitely want to thank the nurseries who've been tremendously cooperative and very good at motivating me to get this moved along, and all the support we've received from Cornell University to manage to develop a program that's really going to mean something. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Marc, a question came in just as Margaret started speaking that was for you. So let's go back and address that first before we get to the ones for Margaret. So Charles asked, since when the vineyard was planted about 30 years ago, there were very few vines infected, and now most vines are infected. It seems that in addition to sourcing clean vines, we need to make sure we prevent infection in the vineyard. Is there a program to allow for such prevention?
Charles, thanks for sharing your observations, which are very valid, and definitely, the fact that you establish a vineyard with clean material is a fantastic start. But monitoring, scouting remains justified and should be put in effect, because you can always deal with influx of viruses through the movement of vectors of these viruses. So vectors that we know of today are of three kinds. Nematodes, dagger nematodes, as Margaret mentioned. So they may be, underground, and whenever a new vine is put in the ground, they may transfer the virus that they have kept over time while thriving in the soil. Other vectors are mealybugs that are known to carry leaf roll viruses, and these mealybugs can eventually, be blown by the wind or equipment, or move from a neighbor's vineyard that might be heavily infected with leaf roll into your own vineyard. And the third type of vector that still needs some confirmation, vector of red blotch, being the three-cornered alfalfa tree hopper. And again, due diligence is absolutely key. So again, scouting on a regular basis, and as soon as a vine is looking suspicious, confirm the presence of the virus and rogue it out is a key to maintain the level of virus to the lowest possible before it gets out of hand and starts spreading very readily, because mealybugs and tree hoppers are very efficient vectors of respectively leaf fall viruses and red blotch. I hope this answered your question.
Okay, thanks, Marc. So, Margaret, let's start with the questions that came in during your talk. Suzanne asked, how big is the chance of moving mealybugs and similar insects on spray or other equipment?
And I don't know if Marc or Tim want to chime in, but insects always need a host, and they're not that they're not going to live on metal or plastic. So I think it's minimal. I think we've got greater risk of even just the wind or working in a block that has an infestation of insects and then moving into a block that doesn't.
So if I want to,
yes.
Can I chime in?
Please.
Yeah, I agree with Margaret's statements. Overall, on the northeast, mealybugs and movement of mealybugs from vineyard to vineyard has been documented, but is not very efficient. And like in more warmer climates, where definitely this is a major issue. And they can definitely move from vineyard to vineyard on field equipment, workers' clothes, or just blown by the wind.
Okay.
Yeah, and we also have the advantage of, which is the one we don't have that California has, I want to say the vine mealybug. There's one very effective mealybug vector that California has that we do not have. So there are advantages to being cold.
That's correct.
All right. Then Tim had a question, or several questions. The first was, what sort of tracking system will you use to trace samples? And then what happens to vines and neighboring vines in the mother block if a vine tests positive? Will neighboring vines be affected?
Okay, so essentially, we work with the nursery and we map out the mother block, and then we will have a start number for a row, and then there's a tagging system where we will tag each sample that we take in the row, and the tag will stay on the vine. And it's a two-part tag where you can pull off the bottom part of the tag, and the pulled off part goes with the sample, and it just has a sample number on it, and then the original tag stays on the vine. So we can go back after we get the results that will be blind tested. It will just be, okay, here's a bunch of grapevines, please test them for the lab. We'll be able to go back into our records and see, okay, these are the sample numbers that were taken at that nursery in those mother blocks, and trace them back. But there will be, the main half of the tag will stay on the vine in the mother block. And then also that same thing goes for any samples that we take in any of the nursery blocks. They'll have a tag on them that we would leave, and then the other piece of the tag with a matching number goes with the sample.
Okay, and then Tim also.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so if the vine is found to be positive, that vine and the 4 adjacent vines get rogued out, and we also do follow-up testing on all the other vines that are in that row to see if it's exists further in there, and then continue to rogue as necessary. But based on the potential spread and how far it would spread, that's the amount of roguing that would be necessary.
Okay. And then Tim also asked, how will this program be financed?
Initially, and actually over the past couple of years, we've been very fortunate. We've received some federal funding from the federal farm bill that has been passed, and that is funding really getting us back in the game of certification. So that's enabled us to do some initial screening of grapevine material from nurseries. That's been able to go to Marc Fuchs' lab and work on developing what this program should be and is now going to be. And we will be able to do some additional testing this year with some of that funding, and then subsequent to that, long term, the program will be paid through basically user fees paid for by the nurseries, and in turn by their customers who are benefiting from the better long-term profitability of their plants.
Okay, then Tim also asked for either Marc or Margaret, how does this program and the intensity of testing compare with programs from other states?
No other state tests 25% of the vines in the mother block, and I also believe that we will be doing a more concerted inspection in the nursery blocks. I suppose in some ways we're lucky that our industry is not as large as California's, but this is very important to us and very important to get done right. So we're going to make sure that we walk through those nursery blocks and look for any symptoms and ask the questions as to what's going on there, because not only do we want to know, the nursery definitely wants to know. So, but the sampling of 1 out of 4 in a mother block in a nursery, nobody else is doing that, and certainly not. And then we'll also be getting the whole block tested every 4 years. No other state's doing that.
Okay. Cindy asked, will certified vines have traceability back to the original foundation material?
Yes, absolutely. There's a very important part of the whole process is documentation and traceability back to the sourcing from the foundation and forward. And we do see periodically the nurseries will tell you they get a little love letter from Foundation Plant Services saying, oh yeah, we sent you this vine and now it's showing up with this problem. So yes, that traceability is very important.
Okay. Annemiek Schilder asked, how about testing weeds in previous crops for tobacco ring spot virus and tomato ring spot virus? Even low levels of dagger nematodes can transmit these viruses. And she also points out that fields may need to be fumigated.
We are going to be practicing best management practices for nematodes, so that nurseries will likely be bringing in some other crops, some grass crops, and also some of the natural fumigating brassicas and the radish-like things. We won't be testing weeds because but I think we will be limiting the risk of exposure because we're looking at very low dagger nematode levels. And I believe some of the nurseries have already done some cover crops of those fumigating type cover crops in order to knock levels down.
Okay. Tim had another question. Nurseries get a lot of complaints about crown gall. Will this be a part of the program? If not, why not?
Thanks, Tim. I thought you were my friend, but essentially, crown gall is tough, and we're not going to pretend it's not. And the nurseries are very interested in seeing what we can do. With the new testing methods, thank you, Tom Burr, we can detect it at very, very low levels. And at this point, we've got material that's very, very clean from a virus point of view that may encounter crown gall, either perhaps it has it or perhaps it's in the soil. But at this point, we would be pushing away a lot of virus-clean material if we made crown gall an absolute factor. We are talking with the nurseries about how do we make this fit in, how do we do an add-on, but I think it's really continued good best management practices and being aware that we get a lot of damage in the winter. I'm welcome any Marc or someone else if you want to chime in on that one.
Yeah, just to complement what Margaret is saying, this is Marc. We would love to include crown gall into the standards of the New York certification program, but we are not there yet. And the reason being that there are still a number of research questions that are not fully understood. For example, we know, as a matter of fact, that we can produce crown gall clean vines. We know we can do that. The challenge is to maintain these clean plants clean in a nursery operation or a field operation. and there are many questions as to how can a clean vine, clean from crown gall, become infected. And as long as we don't have a good handle as to how reinfestation occurs, it will be very difficult to include crown gall into immediately into the certification program. However, this is still our wish to include crown gall because, yes, it is a major disease, especially in the Northeast, to include crown gall in a future or a new version of the New York certification program. So, Tom Berg, you cannot retire, my friend.
He's on. He might not. He's hearing you say all that.
Why do you think we're saying it?
I did hear
all right.
Just chime in.
Well, I just agree completely with what everyone has said, and we've made some major strides in understanding the biology of this pathogen over the last couple of years. And as I reported to the group a week ago or 2 weeks ago, the sources of agrobacterial vitis in the environment are becoming much more clear, and thanks to the funding through the National Clean Plant Network, we're making more discoveries. And one, for example, is the importance of wild grapevines and how this is a major source of agrobacterium vitis in the environment. So I think, as Marc said, and Margaret, I mean, this is a goal. We do want to be able to, and we feel that we can produce clean plants. How we maintain those in a nursery or in a G1 or G2 block are some of the biological questions that we're still working on and getting closer to those answers. But I think it certainly is a goal, and I think it's an attainable goal through our research. So if anybody has any other questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer those as well.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
And no other state certification program includes crown gall testing. They may, a couple of them I think include visual survey for crown gall. It doesn't show up as much where the environment's warm, I can tell you that. So.
Okay. Robert asked, is there a component of the program that surveys abandoned vineyards and destroys them if they are a source of vectors?
No.
Okay. And then Marc asked, are there any plans to do planned surveys of commercial vineyards, say 5, 10, or 15 years out, to measure the realized economic efficacy of the program?
Marc, I think that means Marc Fuchs. I think that means you can't ever retire now. But I think we do look. We work together already doing some surveys with Cornell, and Cornell also on their own is doing some surveys of commercial vineyards for viruses. I do think there'll be some element of this going forward. How much, I can't say. I don't know, Marc, you got any thoughts on that?
It's an excellent point, and definitely there are plans to work with Miguel Gomez from the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management at Cornell University to address these questions to make sure that we fully capture the value of the program. So yes, very, very good idea and suggestion, Marc. Thank you.
All right, so that takes care of all the questions that we've had for Marc and Margaret. So Tim, I'm going to go ahead and switch to Eric's slide, and I guess he won't need to have control since that's his only one. So Tim, do you want to go ahead and introduce this portion of the webinar?
Sure. Now we're going to move on to our nursery segment. And thank you all for coming today and participating. And thanks to Marc Fuchs and Margaret Keller for their excellent presentations describing the certification program. Now we'll be hearing from the owners and managers of the 3 New York nurseries. As Margaret mentioned, each one of them is investing time and money into establishing new increased blocks, but that's not all they've done over the years. They've also been active in the For at least the past 4 years, as Margaret mentioned, they've been working closely with Marc and Margaret to work out the technical details of the certification and monitoring program that's being put into place that you just heard about. And they have also been active in the National Clean Plant Network's Grapes Tier 2 Committee, which is the group that coordinates the efforts across the nation, dating back to the NCPN's formation in 2008. And this has involved a lot of conference calls, travels to lots of meetings in Missouri, Maryland, and California. So they've all put in a considerable amount of time to participate in the meetings that have guided the NCPN on the national level. I've asked Eric, Dennis, and Fred to describe what they're doing in each of their businesses to prepare for the certification program and what their plans are going forward. So each nursery will make a presentation. Then after they're done, we'll open it up to questions. And please feel free to type your questions into the chat bar at any time during the presentations. So by way of introduction, Eric Amberg is the operation manager of Grafted Grapevine Nursery, which was started by his father, Hermann Amberg, in 1957. He has 26 years of professional experience in vineyard management, winemaking, and grape nursery management, and currently serves on the board of the National Clean Plant Network. Dennis will go second, and Dennis Rack operates AA Vineyards with his wife Sue and 2 sons, Adam and Abram. They grow 400 acres of juice and wine grapes and approximately 3 to 4 million grapevines annually for sale across the U.S. And finally, Fred Merwarth is the owner of Hermann Wiemer Vineyards in Dundee, New York. This, of course, was founded by Hermann in 1976, and the nursery has been supplying grafted grapevines for the Finger Lakes, California, other wine regions since 1979. Fred started out as an apprentice winemaker and vineyard management manager, stepped out to do that full-time in 2003, and he partnered with his partner Oscar Binke to take over Wiemer Winery when Hermann retired in 2007. So I'd like to turn it over to Eric now. Can you move the ball, Chrislyn?
He won't need it.
Oh, you won't need it. Okay, Eric, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I only have the one slide, so it's not a big deal. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, I'm Eric Amberg. Been working on the farm my whole life. Just in the last 6 years, I've pretty much taken over all the outside operations of the farm. We are very excited about the new certification program. It's something we've been anticipating for the last 7+ years. And actually, 6 years ago, we started planting our first block in anticipation of certification. We put in an acre from material out of Davis, and we're all excited, and then realized a couple of years later that we had utilized rootstocks that were not traceable back far enough. And then a year later found out that the 1/3 of the vines had red blotch, so ended up the block wouldn't have worked out anyway. But nevertheless, it's something that all the nurseries have been really trying to strive for the last few years, and we're really excited that we're almost there. I'm going to basically tackle the 5 questions that Tim gave us one at a time so that I don't miss something, and let everyone hear out what's going on, or at least what we're doing. So the first question is, what are we doing to prepare for the certified vines? We have selected 4 sites on our farm that have been fallow for at least 10 years. Actually, 2 of them have been fallow for as long as, at least without grapevines, as long as we know. So at least 50 to 60 years or more. 2 of the blocks we use for budwood production for the G2 or G3 blocks, and 2 will be for rootstocks. These sites will be tiled this summer to ensure that they are dry enough for healthy grapevine growth, and planting is planned to start out next year. We're planning on putting in about 10 acres next year, with a total over the next 5 years of 40 acres of new vineyard for the certification program. And I'm going to take this opportunity right now to, I guess, do a little bit of marketing for saying that we are looking for a new assistant vineyard manager to help out with this endeavor, because there's obviously going to be a significant amount of additional work on the farm. So not only is the certification program going to be providing clean vines for the future, it'll also be actually providing some new jobs. So that's one thing we're working on. Also, we'll be planting on these new sites that have already planted, in most cases, vineyard orchard mixed seed to prepare the site for planting to minimize weed competition in the process. The second question was what are we planning for the preparation certification? Currently, we have planned for planting next spring, 2017, 130 different varieties and clones of budwood vines. And in addition to that, we're putting in 12 different rootstock plantings. Currently, we've been producing about 2/3 of our rootstock needs for the farm, those being primarily 3309, 5C, Bobby V, 1616E, and Riparia. And we'll be not only putting those as new certified vineyards, but also adding to that Schwarzman, SO4, 10114, 4453, Paulson 1045, Paulson 1103, and 03916. I have to be honest, 03916 has been highly recommended by Davis. So far, it's not surviving very well. It doesn't seem to like our cold. So I'm not sure how many of these will stay in the vineyard, but at least we're going to try to grow as much as we can. The intent is to be, long-term intent to be 95% self-sufficient, not having to get material in from California or other certified sources, so we can ensure that we have high quality. The third question was how mother blocks will be managed. Our plan is, first off, all budwood blocks will be planted on grafted vines. This will basically eliminate the concern about dagger nematodes spreading virus. We're actually planning on using Schwarzman, or intending on using Schwarzman for our initial planting, because it is one of the rootstocks that has some of the highest resistance to nematodes. So that's the main reason why we're choosing that, as well as to have low to moderate vigor, which will maintain vines that are easier to manage and keep healthy, at least in the cold climate that we have. The vineyards we've primarily done with either VSP or a vertical sprawl type system for maximum wood production. We'll be removing all fruit for high quality wood, and we'll be hilling up the vines every winter and unhilling in spring to ensure that the vines are protected and stay healthy. Even if we get a very bad winter, we can rebuild the vines quickly and keep them healthy, but also avoid sign rooting, which can allow for virus transfer. The next question was, when do we expect the first certified vines to become available? Realistically, we have vines planted in 2017, so we might get a very small crop of wood in 2018, which means 2019 we'd have a tiny batch of certified vines. 2020 should be getting larger. It should be increasing thereafter as these budwood blocks come into production. This is obviously going to be a game of patience, but we are certainly working on that as fast as possible. There is discussion about possibly testing existing vineyards for to be clean and possibly using them for certification or some form of virus-free system. That is not a finalized thing, so I can't say for sure if that will happen by next year. It would be nice, but we're trying to work this as fast as we can. The last question is extra costs. Obviously, there's a significant amount of extra work put into establishing new certified blocks. Some of this work we can do anyway to keep up to speed and to replace old vineyards, but it's still a lot of extra work. I'm actually creating, if nothing else, at least one full position to help out with this project, and there'll be much more beyond that. However, we realistically need to stay competitive with, for example, California, which has the biggest nurseries. And since the California certification program is significantly cheaper because they're really focused on G1 as opposed to G2, we're not sure. We can't bring our prices up too much because we'll lose our customers and not be competitive. At the same token, we also do not know how much this program is going to cost to implement from the standpoint of Ag and Markets and Cornell's testing. That still has to be fully established and hopefully should be done so this year we can nail it down better. So all those cost parameters are still up in the air. We're certainly hoping to keep the cost as low as possible, but realistically we'll be going up some. I'm guessing from our standpoint, probably somewhere between 10 10 and 50 cents per vine for the certified vines, in addition to, of course, the cost that to cover the cost of ag and markets and the testing. So it's a big question out there. Something hopefully that in the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully we nail down a much better idea of what the additional cost will be. Marc obviously made it quite clear that there is a huge benefit for planting clean vines, but there's also reality that planting vines is not a cheap process, and if one can save money, you save it the best you can. Obviously, we're going to try to make that as balanced as possible. The primary goal for us and for the entire industry is to be able to provide clean material so that our customers are happy not only when they get their vines, but happy 15, 20 years down the road. So we truly are, as a industry, not only in New York, but in California as well, trying very hard to provide as clean a material as possible, and this certification program will give us the assurance to that what we are propagating is truly what the customer is looking for. So it is a very exciting process. We really hope that industry backs us up, is patient as we try to get these vines out as quick as we can, but also understanding that there is going to be some costs involved with it, and that but that the nurseries are really going to try to keep that cost as reasonable as possible. If there are any questions, I'm open, or I believe maybe Dennis is going to go next, and the questions at the end.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we're going to hold the questions to the end, but I encourage you all to type your questions into the chat bar while Eric's presentation is fresh in your mind. And we'll just go directly right now again to Dennis Rack from AA Vineyards out in Fredonia, New York. Dennis? I'm sorry, Dennis, we can't hear you yet.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Had two mute buttons on instead of one. I wanted to make sure nobody heard me.
Okay, great.
Anyway, you know, we at AA are working to try and develop our certified blocks, and I'm just going to give you a rundown of what we're doing. Again, the majority of the material coming in here will be the 2010 protocol material from FPS or Prosser. Everything's been through micro-shoot tip culture to help eliminate crown gall, but again, that's not a certification point because we're still learning. A lifetime of this, and we're still learning. How'd that go? But anyway, we will, you know, these vines will help have the highest level of certification available. So we started planning for this a number of years ago. I think 5 or 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to purchase the farm that you see on this picture. This is 80 acres of Shenango gravelly loam, very well drained here in the Chautauqua County area. It, at that time, was actually a shade tree nursery production. We've, over time, cleared all the trees off, done rotational cropping in there with corn and other things to help reduce the chance of tomato ring spot. The blocks that we are going to plant will be, we're going to start with this block right here and then move over to this one and then go from there. But, you know, this is going to be the sort of the foundation of our area. So again, it's got 80 acres of Shenango gravelly loam. There was an irrigation system there, which we'll be utilizing. We've done extensive nematode testing on the farm already. Didn't really find anything that was alarming, but we still wanted to try and reduce nematode levels as much as we could before we got into a situation where it'd be more difficult. So we have used brown mustard cover crops on there. We've done 12-month fallow periods where we've kept it basically bare. And when we've gone back and checked nematode levels after having done that, we've reduced them significantly and far below the thresholds for the certification program. We've also done soil sampling, and we've made our fertility and pH adjustments. We've done all the cleanup of perennial weeds, and again, this site has had no grapes in it for over 20 years. So what we'd like to think here is we've done all of the things that everyone tells you should do when you go into a new site. We've tried to address any issues that are there, done everything we can to put ourselves in a good position to be able to plant vines. Rootstocks, we're going to focus primarily on 3309, 10114, Riparia, and 1103 Paulson. If there are demand for additional rootstocks, we'll bring them in down the road. Again, science selections, we've got about 150 selections that are pretty much ready to go in the ground this spring. We won't necessarily have all of each selection go in the ground this spring. You'll see a slide later on that'll help show you some of the complexity of what we're trying to do. But what we're trying to do is put material in the ground of vinifera, of the clones and things that folks are currently asking us for, or what we think are high quality clones and things that people will need, and also a range of those so that everyone has something to pick from. Beyond the vinifera selections, we've also worked with FPS to clean up most of Bruce Reich's selections from Cornell. So the Valvin Muscats, the Norays, the Aramellas, all of those things will be going into the block. Again, material out of the University of Minnesota. Some of Elmer Swenson varieties have been cleaned up at FPS. Traditional hybrids, Vidal, Sabal, Chamberson, all of those plus more will be in there. And then again, as depending on demand and what people are looking for, we will have those. For us too, we've also got a number of seedless table grapes in this selection. That's a market that we have that is a little different than some of the other nurseries, but we want to have sources of certified table grape varieties too. So vineyard design, we're basically using 8-foot row spacing with a 4-foot vine spacing and 4 vines between post lengths. We're trying to make it easy for the ag and markets folks here to be able to do some sampling. You know, go in year 1, they pick the first vine in the post length, year 2, the second vine, the third vine, fourth vine. It should make keeping track of that pretty easy. We'll be using primarily VSP training system on most of the things, particularly the vinifera and some of the hybrids. Some of the hardy Minnesota things I don't think we'll be running a VSP system on, but the majority of it will be that way. The way our site is set up, we'll have 150 vine rows. We're going to try and maintain 1 variety per row to avoid any possible confusion down the road. And then we'll also have multiple rows of higher volume varieties. Again, we do have drip irrigation set up on the field. Again, it is a pretty well-drained soil. I don't necessarily think we're going to need to irrigate a lot for that purpose, for moisture, but it will allow us to apply fertilizer and also drip in things like imidacloprid for mealybug control and nematode control. Again, we're concerned about winter injury. I mean, we're making a big investment out here. We're going to try this on most of the vinifera using this J training system where, you know, the vines are sort of trained along the ground and up, and then when we'll come in the fall, we'll harvest all our budwood, cane prune everything, and then this will be laid down and mulched in for winter protection. So that should minimize any damage that might cause crown gall as well, and hopefully keep us in a regular cropping pattern so that we have good quality budwood to be able to graft. So timeline, we did plant a few vines last year, a couple of thousand we got in the ground. We've got about 18,000 going in this year, a few thousand next year, and then we're sort of still evaluating, trying to decide what else to put in and what we need to expand. But there'll be additional planting beyond 2017, but that's my immediate time frame. Based on that, it looks like 2018 we'll probably have some plants available for sale, 2019 and beyond, we'll have those vines available in increasing numbers. I put this slide in. This is a picture in my greenhouse, and you see these multicolored tags on everything here. This is part of the material that's going to be planted this spring. All of these are grafted on 10114, and you can see each selection is a different color. And those tags, again, give us sort of the history of the vines. It's you know, what the scion clone number is, what the rootstock is, where it came from. And so, you know, this whole traceability thing will allow us to go back to source vines. But you can see it's complex. And, you know, we've got 150 vine rows out there, and some of those will have 150 vines in them this year, and some of them, you know, we might get 20 vines in this year, and then we'll have to fill it in as we go forward. So key practices, again, we're going to do aggressive mealybug control, looking at, you know, pretty much whatever's available out there chemically to help keep those numbers down so that, you know, we can keep this block clean. I mean, we're spending an awful lot of money to develop this. We don't want to have mealybugs come in and spoil the party. Again, virus testing, as the program has shown, 25% of the vines every year. Continue to do nematode testing, and again, you know, by applying things like imidacloprid or Movento, we're going to help to try and keep our nematode crops levels down. We'll have established grass creeping red fescue cover crop in the row middle to again keep out broadleaf weeds, which might harbor things like tomato ring spot. And again, the winter protection we had talked about. So cost, increased costs. Are there going to be increased costs? The simple answer is yes. I mean, there's just no way that you can look at doing the things that we're doing here to try and establish this without expecting to have some increased costs. You know, we've purchased 80 acres of premium quality land. We've got the vineyard establishment costs. We're going to have extra care and monitoring costs. It'd be nice to make a profit on this down the road. I know that's an awful word for business people to hear, but, you know, profit is good. And that, you know, what the formula is I sort of tried to say, well, what's the increased cost going to be? And, you know, it's sort of an inexact formula here, but you've got to take your capital costs plus the additional operating costs plus the testing costs that the program is going to have, add a little bit of profit to that, and then divide that by the number of vines produced over time, and that's going to give you what that added cost per vine will be. I don't have all the numbers to put into that formula yet, but you know, certainly it will come up with a number at the end here once we get this all done. And obviously, again, we're concerned. You know, we have concern about raising prices too. But again, you know, what we're doing here is really going to add value to the industry, and you know, it has to be paid for somehow. And you know, if you're a business, you have to look at what you do, you have to look at your costs are, and then you know, you need to price things accordingly. I mean, that's basic economics right there. I mean, you can't deny that you have to pay for what you spend. If you don't, the banks don't like you very well. And ultimately, that's going to end up with, you know, having some really nice certified nursery stock out there, which we'll be able to ship to folks all over the country here, and have you know, successful industry here in the East. With that, I guess I'm done, and I'm willing to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dennis. And I'm going to let Fred go again first as our final nursery speaker, but I encourage you all to, whatever questions you have for any of these people, to type them into the chat bar on the lower right-hand side, and we'll address those at the end. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Fred Merwarth from Hermann Wiemer Vineyard in Dundee, New York. Fred?
Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Fred Merwarth from Hermann Wiemer Vineyard, manager, winemaker, and owner here at the winery and vineyard and nursery. So we've looked at this in terms of a three-part process. One is, what are we doing now in 2016? What are we doing to transition to prepare for vines, say last year, 2 years ago, and into the near future as mother blocks and source blocks come into production, and then ultimately into the future, how do our mother blocks and source blocks set up? And so I'll kind of go through a little bit of a process here. Our mother blocks and source blocks, we're looking at a 3 to 5 year plan to create about a 20-acre parcel on Earls Hill Road, combination of rootstocks and scion wood. We started this process in 2013 with a Riesling planting, 6 different clones of Riesling, and we've increased that in 2014-15 with the major planting going on this spring of about 6,000 plants. We're building this out on the rootstock side with 10114, SO4, 3309, and Riparia. And then on the scion side, continued push with Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Pinot, Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, and several other varieties that we are, as a winery, looking at. And that source block will continue to increase with scion wood in 2017 and 2018. From these blocks, I see us being able to supply the new certified material starting in 2017, and then be able to increase production as this year's planting continues to grow. What are we looking at from a 3 to 5 year plan to transition out of our old scion blocks and rootstock blocks into this new 20-acre block on Earls Hill? I think that's really important because as 3 nurseries here, we can't just stop production and where we are and say, okay, well, in 2019, we're going to have plants available for you. It has to be a concerted effort by everybody to continue to move material that is clean and as clean as we possibly can make it. So how did we look at transitioning here? The transition is really looking at every single individual vine that we are sourcing material from. So that's from the scion and from the rootstock. Will have been tested in 2015 twice. And with a 3rd round of testing happening this year in 2016. So that came up with 2013, we had 13,000 samples, 9,000 samples in 2014, 9,000 samples again in 2015, mainly looking at leaf roll, spot testing for red blotch, but leaf roll has really been, I think, the greatest concern from speaking with Marc, speaking with the other nurseries, and just making sure that we have a very good handle on that virus. And so looking at individual vines, we've mapped out all of our current budwood sections and all of our current rootstock sections, labeled every vine, and sampled every single vine twice within the last 3 years. And that's obviously been a big undertaking for us. Now looking at vines that we have available that we're grafting this year, 2016, going forward, if we are purchasing material, it's only Protocol 2010 or Certified Oregon from growers who are doing the exact same type of testing that we are doing. And that, I think that's really important because it's looking at, again, from an individual vine basis, what is the cleanliness of these mother plants. And what we've put together, what we've looked at for 2015-2016 is traceability, and that's a critical point of the New York certification, is the traceability of every plant, finished plant, coming out of the nurseries, making sure that we as the nursery know where this material is coming from, the origin of the G2 or the G3, and then also turning around to the customer and saying, where is this material coming from? Have you tested this? Have you inspected the blocks for trueness to type? All of those types of things. And that's a critical point of I think the New York certification, but also what we're doing, tracing the material. So as of 2017, all vines will have a barcode, which then translates back to how we've sourced, and then with respect to the individual scion and rootstock blocks. I think that is everything that I have. One other point I'd like to make is that one of the challenges that I think both Dennis definitely mentioned it, and Eric also alluded to it, is kind of how slow this process has gone and is going to get material. And part of it, we're all looking at 2018, 2019 to finally get vines into the market. Part of it is there is, as Marc Fuchs pointed out, there's only a handful of mother plants at Davis or at Prosser that all nurseries can source from, which has made it extremely difficult for the nurseries to accumulate enough graftable wood from these new plantings, the Procol 2010 materials. And one thing that we've looked at is not just what clonal selections, but materials themselves, the high quality materials that we have in New York already, and how do we get cleaned up and into a certification program that allows these materials to hit the market. And so we're looking at some of the old materials that Hermann brought in, mapping them out, indexing individual vines, propagating these plantings into our 20-acre block on Earls Hill, so that we do have selections of Riesling, of Chardonnay, of Cabernet Sauvignon that aren't necessarily clonal selections, but selections that have certain characteristics that are desirable, whether it's flavors, acid retention, durability, cold hardiness. I think this is another critical piece of being a cool climate nursery, trying to create material for the Northeast, but then also trying to get this material out of just general nursery production and into certification production. So that's another key piece that we are working on. So there, again, I'll take questions as well as Dennis and Eric will, and I'd like to thank everybody for listening, and it's been a very, very good discussion. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Fred. This is Tim again, and Fred raises a very important point in that the G1 material from the foundation blocks in California and Washington State, that's sort of a longer-term thing. And I think Fred mentioned that there are things that the nurseries are doing to actually test their existing stock, even though that's not going to result in a vine that they can label New York certified. So I want to ask maybe Margaret or Marc, if you're still there. what do we do about this existing material that obviously, Dennis, Marc, you've done a lot of testing. Is there any sort of intermediate designation that could be made for those, or any claims?
Yes, we're going to work with each nursery to look at what work they've done in preparation and audit what they have. What's the record keeping that you have? Show me that you sourced this from processors. Show me that you had this cleaned up somewhere. Show me the testing that you've done on these fields, and we're going to work to bring anything under the umbrella of certification that we can, but without sacrificing the standards that we all have worked together to make and make meaningful. So anything that we can get into the program without sacrificing, we will.
Tim, are you still there? You're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to ask Marc Fuchs if he had any additional comments to make about what Margaret just mentioned, about the idea that you've been testing other materials and how to get those into the program, or an intermediate sort of thing.
So basically, yes, I'm very supportive, of this transitional time, and making sure that, as Margaret mentioned in her talk, there is currently clean material that is propagated and distributed by the local nurseries. And in the past 5 years, in average, I've been running 15,000 samples a year on this material, try to help the nurseries identify the cleanest possible. And so that whenever I was fortunate or unfortunate to identify a virus-infected either rootstock or sign, they would be in a position to make an informed choice to basically destroy this material. So we have been working diligently behind the scenes for several years to help this transition phase before the certification is in full swing.
Thank you, Marc. I'd like to turn now to a question from John, and I'm not sure that the nurseries can answer this, but this is for all the nurseries. For participating growers, how isolated are your mother blocks from other commercial vineyards, and how clean are these commercial vineyards? And do the commercial vineyards actively control virus vectors? I can answer the last question, that certainly there are a lot of commercial vineyards around the Finger Lakes, and most of them would not be spraying for mealybugs per se. So anybody, Dennis or Eric, would like to address the question? How about Eric?
Well, I can address it from the perspective that I don't have any neighboring vineyards around me. So I don't have issues with virus potentially being spread from other vineyards. The only possibility might be from the woods or whatever, and my new blocks are actually well away from them, or my new certified blocks are well away from the woods also. We are intending on spraying with a Sale and Movento for control, just to be on the safe side, to stem off any mealybug presence in the vineyards and reduce that issue. And so I feel very comfortable, because of my location, that I don't have really much risk, if any risk, from these bringing virus in from outside. I have also been testing my vineyards, not to the degree that Fred has. I'm hoping to do that this year, mainly to work with ag and market so that they can verify what I've done, so that my existing vineyards are, I know, are clean. What I have identified up to this point with random testing, or testing everything on every vine, where I found virus, I've pulled the vines out, those rows out of those varieties out that have shown any virus. So we've been trying to be proactive in the process, but I believe we should be able to, once we've established our new vineyards, we should be able to keep them clean without too much difficulty.
Okay, Dennis or Fred, anything to add to that? If not, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, our particular location is probably a quarter mile away from any existing vineyards. We're doing the same things. We're going through the woods and making sure that any wild vines that are there that we're getting out of there to help reduce that. You know, I don't think anyone out here is doing anything commercially to control mealybugs in vineyards. We just, again, I think this is an area that we need to understand and learn a little bit more about. We know that mealybugs vector virus, but again, a whole lot more to know. But in our case, again, with the investment we got, we're going to take the approach that we're just going to do everything we can at this point to control mealybugs and eliminate issues.
Thank you. Fred, do you have anything to add there? Or?
The only thing is that our Earls Hill property, it's about 400 feet from an established commercial vineyard, up the hill and to the west a little bit.
Oh, you just dropped out.
I just dropped out?
Okay, you're back.
There
yeah.
we go. And so the site has never had vineyards on it, and there are no woods around the property. So it's a pretty open site. I'm kind of to echo Dennis and Eric, we're doing the necessary best practices to manage the perimeter as well as soil treatments. So that's, I think, the best that all of us can do at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just mention that 100 feet isolation that we're requiring for the mother blocks is the most that any state certification requires.
So, Margaret, I want you to stay on the line here because Cindy Cooper has a question, and she's addressed it to Dennis or Margaret. Will this planting be considered G2? I believe she's referring to Dennis Rack's planting. And what viruses will you test for on the 4-year rotation?
Yeah, we're going to sit down with Dennis and review the records and the documentation and do the best that we can to see, you know, what can we prove and be confident in, and look at the testing and the rest that's been done. So if something does meet the criteria and we've got evidence of it, we want to make it available because there is such a demand. But I think the nurseries could also tell you I'm not a pushover, so it's that delicate balance. So, and I'm really glad that Albany's as far away from Fredonia as it is.
So, you know, from my standpoint, I would consider the block that I'm establishing to be a G2 because the source material came from a G1 and it's been grafted and it'll be established there. So the material that we are planting, you know, meets the criteria for a G2, yeah, which is foundation material established in an increased block. So I would say yes, we're meeting the criteria for a G2.
Okay.
And then as to the question about what viruses will you test for on the 4-year rotation, that's the tomato ring spot virus, the tobacco ring spot virus, grapevine fan leaf virus, 5 of the grapevine leaf roll associated viruses, and if you need the numbers, you got to talk to Marc, and grapevine red blotch associated virus. And so at this point, we'd be the only state including red blotch in our testing scenario. We may just be beating out California by a few months because they're still trying to get through their regulatory process. But we will have red blotch included, which has not been included previously by anybody.
Okay, I think I'll move on to the next question. There's one more question, and then I have one too. This is from Bill to Eric, Dennis, or Fred, or everybody. The question is, for new replants, do you suggest grow tubes? Would you plant new baby vine reds in a red blotch / leaf roll removed vine spot, I guess where the vine with red blotch or leaf roll was removed in the past fall, would you plant that the following spring? And would a replacement vine with 1 or 2 size spaghetti roots be a qualified 1-year growth? So let's go to Eric first on that.
Okay, as far as grow tubes are a nice tool for controlling, especially with interplanting, know where the vine is, and for making it easier for application of spray material, primarily weed spray. Beyond that, it's okay, it doesn't really matter. As far as replanting, I think it's necessary if you're replacing vines that were infected with virus and you're culling them out, you would want to make an effort to cut the trunk and paint, or either spray the vine with Roundup so you're killing the vine so you kill the roots as well, or at least when you cut the trunk, paint the trunk with Roundup, concentrated Roundup to kill the roots, so that you're eliminating the ability of the roots in the ground from transferring virus to the new vine, mainly from the standpoint of grafting. The last part of it I didn't quite catch as far as the question.
That would be, would a replacement vine with 1 or 2 size spaghetti roots, I'm not sure what that means either, be a qualified 1-year growth? I think that might have been a...
1-year growth. As far as grade 1 or grade 2, it sounds like grade 2 as opposed to grade 1, but without seeing the vine, it's difficult to establish that. As far as using for replanting in the existing vineyard, really, unless you have a very good job of following up, it's a better idea to plant a grade 1 vine. Tends to need less TLC the first year, and since vines within an existing vineyard easily overlooked, they don't necessarily get the TLC that they need. So I would recommend more towards a grade 1 vine.
Okay, I think I'm going to ask Marc if he would be willing to chime in again about replanting new vines in a place where there was red blotch or leaf roll the year before. Do you have any thoughts about that, Marc?
Yeah, just to complement Eric's comments, and I agree, there is no reason, if the question was, should I delay the planting of the clean vines where on the same spot where leaf or red blotch infected vines used to be? The answer is no if you are farming in the northeast. The reason being that red blotch vectors or leaf roll virus vectors are not known to thrive underground. Therefore, they are not capable of acquiring the virus from remnant infected roots and start a new infection through the soil. And this, obviously, my answer would be different if I were to address a farming community in California where some of the mealybug species are known to overwinter on roots. And Margaret mentioned the vine mealybug. This is the one I had in mind that would qualify to overwinter on roots. In the East Coast, we are dealing primarily with a grape mealybug, and that thrives on the aerial part of a vine only, and gills mealybug, and both thrive on the aerial part of the vine. Therefore, there is no reason to delay the planting. It can be done the following spring after the infected vines are removed in the fall.
Just a little follow-up there, Marc, and I don't want to drag this out too long, but would it be wise to remove adjacent vines as well if you find a vine with symptoms?
That is a good comment, actually, Tim. And yes, we have shown that it is economically, if you are practicing, let's come back to the leaf roll situation. Our management recommendations are if the leaf roll virus prevalence is higher than 25%, meaning more than 25% of the vine in any given block are infected with leaf roll, remove the entire block. This is economically attractive. It might sound counterintuitive, but it is economically attractive. If the leaf roll virus prevalence is lower, much lower, roguing, removing an individual vines is recommended. And if you were to remove, for example, 2 vines in any given panel, we recommend to remove the 2 adjacent vines on each side of the 2 that you're removing, just as an insurance policy, because the two adjacent vines might have been visited already by mealybugs carrying the virus. So although they might not show symptoms and they might not test positive at the time of removal, they might become symptomatic in subsequent years, so you're better off to remove these adjacent vines as well, as early as possible.
Okay. So Chrislyn mentions to me there was a question from Charles Massoud. Did you get it? Chrislyn, I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So Charles Massoud asked a question. There's a USDA cost-sharing program to remove virus-infected vineyards and replant them, provided this is done within the following year of removal. Since there's no real supply, it seems that we either need to keep infected vineyards in place until there's enough certified material or have to forego the USDA help. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I might like to respond to that. I know there was a program out west, and I'm not sure if it applied to New York or not, to replace vines with red blotch. I don't know what the basic parameters are of this program are, and what they would have to, where the vines would have to be sourced to get that, and whether they're need to be certified. Does anybody else, Mark, do you have any thoughts on that or not?
Unfortunately, not really, because I'm not familiar with the program that Charles is referring to. Sorry.
So, Charles, I'm going to have to maybe follow up with that with you, if that's okay. Okay, I have a final question for the nurseries and maybe Mark. I've counted up, I think Eric mentioned 20 acres of G2 block. Dennis mentioned 40 acres, and then Fred mentioned 20 acres. That adds up to 80 acres times 800 vines when this is fully in play. 800 vines per acre. That would be 64,000 vines in a G2 block. So that implies that you're going to test about 20,000 a year. So any thoughts about, Mark, how big of an army of summer helpers that would be? And Margaret, how an inspector might, cover that much per year? Any thoughts about the scope of the testing for the program from anybody? So anybody can chime in here.
I believe Mark has said in the past that numbers don't scare him, so I'm not concerned.
Good of memory.
He said that 7 years ago. He's regretted it ever since.
No, I think, again, we are all learning here. It's a new program, and the more we do to gain confidence in the cleanliness of the material, everyone will be winning at the end of the day. And whatever we intend to implement starting as soon as possible might change, because nothing is written in stone. Again, we learn from the lessons, and we might loosen up the testing because we have so much confidence that it's so clean, or the opposite. We might, increase the standards to a different level because of unperceived needs today, and something might pop up or a new virus might come up and we have to change the regs. But, we have to start somehow, and we'll make it work.
Okay. Any closing?
Tim,
yeah,
I
Eric?
just want to point out that of the 40 acres I'm planning on, for Eric Amberg, of the 40 acres that I'm planning on putting in for the G2 block, 25 to 30 acres of that will be rootstocks, which are only 200 vines per acre, so that will help that number a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Okay, with that, I think that was our last question. This has been enormously informative, particularly this session. So I want to thank all the nursery owners and ask at this point, are there any final remarks that any of you would like to make? Okay, yeah, Dennis?
Well, no, I just, again, thank everyone for participating. I hope that, this type of webinar shows the commitment that the nursery industry in New York has to moving forward and really trying to come up with a program and to produce vines that are going to be, valuable for the whole industry. And as you can see from the commitment that all of us has made, we are moving forward, and it is slower than we'd like, but we know it's for a good purpose, and we're determined to make it happen.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in the series, all of our speakers in the previous sessions, as well as Deborah Golino, Director of Foundation Plant Service, and the folks at the new National Clean Plant Network, including Eric Rudy from USDA APHIS, and David Procune, who run the program, Rose Gergrich and Sue Sims, the outreach coordinators. And we got funding for this from the National Clean Plant Network, from the USDA Federal Capacity Funds, and especially crop block grant through the New York State Department of Ag and Markets, and also additional funding from the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. At this point, then, I'd like to thank everybody, and also mention that all of these webinars will be posted online. I believe Chrislyn has posted the URL or the link to the entire webinar series. So I hope that this serves as a resource for interested people for for some time to come. So with this, I'm going to turn it back to Chrislyn, and I want to thank her too for her excellent coordination of this series and all the things that make this webinar run so well. So Chrislyn?
Thanks, Tim. I really don't have any final words. Just want to echo Tim's thanks to all the speakers and everybody who participated online. I did post the link to the website where the recordings are posted. I'll connect with Tim and make sure we're going to leave them there. And once I have this webinar posted as well, I'll be sending out a link to everybody who's registered with the link to that website in it, so that you all have it. So that's all I have. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you all for joining. With that, we'll close it out. And thanks to Marc, Margaret, Dennis, Eric, and help me, Fred.
One more thing. I posted a link to the post-webinar survey. If you guys would click on that link and take the survey, it won't take you any more than 5 minutes. That will be helpful in our reporting to our funders to have feedback from the audience. So thanks, everyone.